Hello there and welcome back to Laurence Plays Factorio Planetary Pioneers, and we're back once again on Castra. Yes, we thought we'd escaped this planet, but after we went off to Gleba, things started to get a little bit violent out here. In the past, when we left this planet, I mentioned how it was able to produce occasional gun turrets like this, which were mildly dangerous. If any bots happened to be flying over, they'd tend to get shot down, and if we went over there, then our lasers would dispose of them very, very quickly. So they weren't a huge danger, but they were a bit of a sign of things to come. And so when we left the planet, it was much like this. We had our belts heading out into a bit outside the areas we were trying to defend, because there were extra resources there that we wanted. But we'd built up some walls around here, linking up some of the big lakes of oil, and Tristan had put in this massive area of radars over here to create crazy amounts of pollution in an attempt to taunt the data collector just outside the wall into doing something a little bit more exciting, because at this point it said there was a 4% chance of it creating a battle tank if it had 1,000 data to play with. So we made sure we gave it a lot more than 1,000 data, and if I turn on the debug options here, you can see that these chunks down here have roughly 2,000 data in them, so there's quite a lot available down here, and we thought that would easily be enough for it to produce one of those tanks if it was going to. But nothing happened, and eventually we went, okay, well, it doesn't seem to be working, never mind, let's head off, we've got other planets to fry. During the next stream, the Castrians, well, Castra does research over time, so every so often we'll get a little pop-up in the bottom corner of the screen telling us that the Castrians have researched something, and it's usually something fairly useless, like it'll tell us they've discovered lignumis, or they've discovered how to make chemical science, or something like that. But eventually, they invented tanks, and once they'd invented tanks, they're then able to start spawning them in, as you can see here. And that causes them to trundle in over like this and then start trying to cause difficulties. So here we've got one of our combat robot ports. Unfortunately, it's run out of robots to launch. They're all sort of crashed on the ground over here. And that means that then these tanks are able to just sort of waltz into the base and go around causing trouble. And that's not good. So this one over here seems to have some. So I think this is going to launch some and hopefully defend itself. We shall see. Well, in theory, there we go. It's launched some bots out, and they just got absolutely rinsed by the tanks. So they're not enormously effective, but they are perhaps better than nothing. I'm not sure if they actually even are better than nothing, because they don't seem to actually really do any good. And so, fortunately, the tanks aren't very smart. So these ones have started attacking one of the jammed data collectors. So this is technically a building that belongs to us. But because it's a data collector, it heals very quickly, and it's being kept jammed by this jammer radar right next to it. So they're not having too much of an effect at the moment. But there are quite a lot of them being produced, so if we zoom out a bit, we can see that large numbers of them are attacking the factory from various different directions. He says, suddenly completely unable to find any of them. Oh, there's a couple more up here. And also this shows off rather nicely that they are capable of driving on the oil. So once again, they're attacking a jammed data collector, not enormously dangerous, but still a little bit of a concern, because as more of them start to spawn in, and you can see we've got quite a few around this data collector, even more around these two up here, eventually these guys are going to head over and start attacking us, and you can hear all the bloops of things getting destroyed. So if we'll have a look down here, yeah, there's quite a large number of tanks trundling up here. They're going to have very little, they're not going to be scared very much by the defender capsules that are popping up. Nope, there we go, they've just wrecked those. And then they're going to start destroying the belts as well. So, yeah, they like to come in and do all kinds of damage to our infrastructure. They don't seem to be in... but we do have Spidertrons that allow us to do a certain amount of defense. And the Spidertrons are all equipped with blue rockets, which are very effective against these things, at least until they run out, which all of these ones appear to have done. Nearly all these ones appear to have done. The other problem with the blue rockets is they do a lot of collateral damage as well, so we've blown up quite a lot of stuff around here, and we're getting lots and lots of things being wrecked at the moment. Yeah, there's a lot of destruction happening down here. There's a few tanks driving around, they're shooting things, it's all going a bit wrong. And so we decided this meant we need to defend our pollution cloud. And so that required us to go out and do a certain amount of combat. We decided that because of the various different defences of these things, a two-pronged attack would be a good idea. So I drove out there in a tank using the depleted uranium cannon shells, because those are very effective against the data collectors themselves. And remember, the data collectors are what spawn in all of the tanks. And so that allowed me to drive out there and start to pummel them reasonably effectively. I was able to take them out with about half a dozen shots, I think, and that was manageable. However, the tank I was driving wasn't very effective against the enemy tanks that were driving around, getting in the way and trying to stop me. So Tristan came out as well with a Spidertron that was armed with the blue rockets, because those do a lot of damage to the enemy tanks. And that was quite effective. As a team, it worked really well, because his rockets were useless against the data collectors but great against the tanks, whereas my tank shells were rather slow to build and not enormously effective against the enemy tanks. I mean, they killed them, but they were a rather expensive and slow way of doing it, but they were quite effective against the data collectors. And so we spent a bit of a time driving around the bottom left corner of the factory, cleaning out as many of the data collectors as we could find. And that was a fairly slow and somewhat laborious and very, very manual task. But it worked, and it was allowing us to clear out a bit of area, and we pushed them back some distance, as you can see here. Sophia decided that this wasn't good enough for his liking. He wanted to do things in a slightly more hands-off way. So he's been going around putting in artillery turrets, like this one, all the way around the edge of the base, and they're being fed with blue chests like this, and they're just lobbing shells out at any data collectors they can see in their catchment areas. So if we switch back over to turret ranges here, I'm just going to try and ignore all the blooping noises, because we are losing a lot of stuff all over the factory at the moment. And it's all happening up here, I see. Yeah, that's you see the problem. There quite a lot of tanks will come in, and we don't have any defences up here because we just never got round to building them. So that was a bit of a mistake. And the artillery, as I say, Sophia has got firing out, is doing quite a lot of damage to these the data collectors out here, but also it's annoying the tanks enough that they will come off and try and attack us. So over here, it doesn't matter because we've got a good defensive wall, and as you can see, it's killed lots and lots of the tanks. But over here, we've got, you can see we've got artillery shells being fired up at about here. Previously, maybe there were some that were going up here, and so there's lots of tanks have been woken up and alerted, and they've been going in, and they're just absolutely wrecking things in this sort of area. This got to a slightly silly point with stuff being destroyed, where Mark actually decided that it was a bit too ridiculous and a bit too wasteful, and I think he stopped the lime dropping some of the supplies down onto Castra because it was too much. However, Sophia has, I think, diverted one of the Vulcanus ships, which is now dropping down enormous quantities of tungsten, and is making the artillery shells down here on Castra itself in order to then pass them out to all of the artillery guns that are firing them off. So it's sort of self-contained, but it does still take quite a lot of resources to make an artillery shell. It's 4 tungsten plate each. The rest comes from on this planet, so it doesn't really matter. But those 4 tungsten plates have to be brought in from Vulcanus. And it takes an absolutely enormous number of shells to take out one of the data collectors. So this one here, I believe, is being shelled at the moment. As you can see, they heal quite quickly. It's got 55,400 and 54,000. So we're knocking off about 1,500 health with each artillery shell. And so you can see it's going to take somewhere in the region of 30 to 40 shells, especially with the regenerations it's doing, to actually destroy one of these things. In fact, it looks like more like 1,000 health being taken off with each hit. So it's going to take about 90 shells to destroy one of these, which means getting on for almost 400 tungsten, and that's a lot of tungsten. If we take a look at Vulcanus, you can see enormous amounts of tungsten being taken away by the rockets, not particularly surprisingly, given what I was just saying. So they're all shipping it up to the one of the ships that's in orbit up here. It's either the Richard Dean Anderson or the Edward James Olmos, which is then transporting all of that tungsten back over to Castra in order to allow more artillery shells to be made. And tungsten, you can get 250 in a rocket, so it's about a rocket and a half for each one of those data collectors we destroy, and there were quite a lot of them around here. So it's going to take quite a long time. However, the theory is that once it's finished doing all of that, things will calm down a bit, and we'll mostly be defending the pollution cloud. Now, the bit over here was from, as I said, from Tristan's radars, which we've now removed, and we're optimistic that this area is going to just clean itself up over time as it's get absorbed. Now, it might lead to a lot of tanks being made, but hopefully it will just sort of eventually tidy itself up. Sophia has also, to be fair, been doing quite a lot of active defence, so when the tanks come in and start to wreck an area, he will then go in with some Spidertrons and attempt to push them back, which works reasonably well. He's able to take them out. We've lost quite a few Spidertrons, and we aren't making the blue rockets anything like fast enough to keep them loaded in order to destroy the threats as they come in. And when we try and use the blue rockets, we do tend to end up blowing up quite a lot of our own stuff as well. But the theory's there, and it sort of kind of mostly maybe works at least some of the time. And so if we skip forward another week, so after another stream, you can see that the artillery has now basically calmed down. You can see the range of it going round out here, and it has managed to destroy all of the data collectors inside its firing range. And so that means that now, and also virtually all of the pollution, there's a little bit of it down here, admittedly, virtually all of the pollution is now also inside the artillery range. So we are now reasonably safe from attacks by more of those tanks. There may be the odd one dribbling in from time to time, but basically things are pretty good. There's also a lot of Spidertrons spaced around the outside down here, and I think ideally we'd want to extend these walls and probably just make a big square or many gon around the outside here to sort of just to block off the entire area, because we've noticed that the tanks aren't very dangerous when they run into one of our big defensive walls. I can't see any dead ones along here. It's obviously been long enough that they've all been they've despawned or something. But yeah, the tanks can't realistically get past our wall defences. But if they trundle in over the lakes, or if they trundle into an undefended area like up here, then things tend to go a little bit more badly. But yeah, we now have the Spidertrons up here. They're now decently loaded. They've got lots and lots of ammunition, so this should keep itself going quite happily and just keep the area protected reasonably well. So it was a long process. It took about 2 streams of constant shelling and damage alerts and going, oh no, I better go and move the Spidertrons around a little bit, and oh no, we've run out of rockets, to get things sorted out. But eventually, things calmed down. I'm not sure where the Castrians have got to with their research so far, but there's a button I can click over here that tells me they're about to discover themselves. Oh, well done there. So that'll be interesting. I'll hold up a mirror in front of them. But one of the things I found quite interesting is, while we've been looking around at them, we've seen them having tanks, we've seen them having bullet turrets, but I've not seen any other types of turrets. Now, I do remember in the past, when I was making one of the videos in the very distant past, one of them spawned in a flame turret and then sort of laid waste to the area around it with fire, which was quite spectacular. But that hasn't happened during any of our streams, which is a little bit weird, and I'm not sure why not. But that does go to show that they are capable of building turret types other than just bullet ones. And so that worries me a little bit, that at some point in the future, they're going to discover artillery. And having a look at the researches we've done, well, we've got Castra here, and that's the one they're doing at the moment. And artillery itself is down here. So it's about 6 rows further on, and each row is 7. So we're looking at about another 40 researches. However, it is also possible that some of the researches up here that are appearing in red or even in yellow that we haven't done yet, but theoretically maybe could, are considered to be between those two. So I reckon we've got at least 40 more researches from the Castrian enemies before they get artillery. But when they do, that's going to be a little bit worrying. I think in order to deal with that, we will need to have a solid wall that goes all the way around the outside of everything that is ours that they might attack, and with decent amount of artillery all the way around that as well, to make sure we've pushed everything of theirs back beyond artillery range. And then we need to try and stay ahead of them on artillery range researches, because if they catch up with us on that, then they're going to be able to outrange us. Things are going to go very, very badly for us. And so this isn't something I know is going to happen, but it's something that seems likely based on my understanding of how the game works. And so I think it's something we need to be aware of and perhaps try to defend against and try to block. So most of the way around here, it's not going to be too difficult to build a wall that goes around, sort of all the way around the outside of here. This lake here is going to be a little bit difficult. Maybe we'll just leave a little bit of a gap here and hope our weapons can... Yeah, I reckon we can have our weapons more or less outranged, or we just loop the wall in through this gap here. That's not too bad. I reckon we can defend this area pretty well. However, I'm very aware that if we try and build a wall out that far and then defend out to an artillery range from the wall, that is going to mean destroying a lot more of the data collectors in this sort of area down here, all the way across here, and all these ones down here, and so on and so on. And if we do that with artillery, it's going to require bringing in an enormous amount more tungsten, and we're going to get a lot of attacks during that time. Now, granted, if we built a wall around the outside, then the wall will deal with any tanks that are coming in. But it's going to be an awful lot of faff and hassle and aggro and so on, and an enormous amount of tungsten in order to try and clear that whole area out. The other possibility is to go back out there with tanks and Spidertrons and try and clear them out manually again, but that was a slow process and it's a big old area. Nukes are absolutely useless against the data collectors, so there's no point in trying those because they have a really, really high resistance against explosion. So they will have a 95% resistance against explosive damage, which is why the blue rockets don't really do very much to them, and why we were using the uranium tank shells, which do physical damage instead, which they only have a 10% resistance to. So nukes aren't an answer. We might find that we get another weapon type from another planet. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, I don't know. But I do feel like it's going to be quite a lot of effort to get Castra to a place where it's going to actually be safe. But if we want to hang on to this planet, and we kind of do because we're going to need the research packs from it, if not now, then we're going to need them later, we're going to need to hang on to this planet and keep producing its resources. The other thing that's a little bit alarming is if we do go out there and destroy all of the data collectors, then if we decide actually we could do with a bit more battlefield data coming in, then we're going to have to go out and find a way of going out and getting even more of them. I don't think that's going to be a problem because at the moment we've got them all turned off. We've got controls set on the exerters, I think. Yeah, we've got controls set on all the exerters that unload stuff from them, saying if there is less than 10,000 Battlefield Science Pack made, then operate. And there is more than 10,000 Battlefield Science Pack made, so they're not operating. And so the machine thing over here has just picked up, has created a load of stuff, and then stopped at that point. Now, there was a question that came out earlier. What happens if you try just unloading the battlefield data packets? I don't seem to be able to. Why not? Want that. I'll go in here and I'll filter to that. There we go. Okay, that's worked. And now if I disconnect from there, this will unload all of the data packets. And as it does, I want to see what appears in here, whether this changes to something else, whether it stops spawning data packets, whether it'll carry on, or whether it'll jam up and just stop running. So there we go. Now let's reconnect this one to the network so that it stops running again. Then we can watch in here and see what happens in time as as it starts to try to produce things. So that time it produced a battlefield data packet. Is that because that's the only thing it can produce, and so if we put these filters on they will only produce battlefield data packets? If so, that could be a very useful way of specifically getting out the resource that we want. The other stuff we can more or less make from other ways. So yes, electric engine units are useful, but we don't really need to be making them. The low density structures, actually, they're very useful. We should probably filter those out as well because we need them to make rockets. Oh no, that time it didn't make a battlefield data packet. But we can set them to only make battlefield data packets, essentially. And the rest of the time it just doesn't do anything. So that's interesting and mildly worth knowing, I think. And so, that largely brings you up to date on what's been going on over on Castra. It's a bit of a silly place. We've had some shenanigans going on with the locals, but I think we've managed to push them back at least far enough that things are alright for now. Further effort is going to be required later, I think, in order to keep the place safe, but for now, I think that's probably good enough. So, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope it's been an interesting insight into how things have been going on Castra and when I think we're going to get bitten again. If you've enjoyed the video, then please come along to the streams on Monday at 7:30 PM UK time, where you can see us making all of these sort of nonsense decisions in real time and hoping that things will go well. If you'd like to give this mod a try yourself, then you can grab the Planetary Pioneers mod pack from the Factorio mod portal. Install that in your game and you'll get all of the planets, all the quality of life mods we've been playing with, and then you can edit that to your heart's content afterwards if you want, but it'll get you started. And if you'd like to play in the same universe as us, kick off with the seed 11111, and that should create things that look very familiar to you, as long as the mod changes over the months haven't tweaked things too much, shall we say. I'm also going to be back on Wednesday when I should be playing something else. At the moment, that's largely been Foundry, which is basically Factorio, but in a Minecraft world. So we've got a third dimension to play with, which means I can dig tunnels, I can run belts up and down, ramps, and to machines on top of machines, which is very nice and allows me to expand my brain in a slightly different way. These videos come out every Thursday and Friday, so please make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel so you don't miss out on those. And once again, thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you next time, and bye-bye.